Mr. Mayor, it's now 4:03. We can begin at your pleasure.
All right, thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And, but while do we have our chaplain here for the invocation?
No, Mr. Mayor, the invocation was only for the regular meeting.
Okay, perfect,
not for
perfect. I got the wrong agenda up here. All right, go ahead and roll call the vote.
This is the roll call for the 4 p.m. work session, November 15, 2022, City of South Fulton City Council. The Honorable Captain F. Rao, District 1.
Present.
The Honorable Carmelita Gums, District 2.
Present.
The Honorable Helen Z. Willis, District 3.
President, and please excuse my absence. I am participating virtually today because I had death in the family, and I had to attend a funeral today.
Thank you. The Honorable J.C. Sebastian, District 4. Present. The Honorable Corey A. Reeves, District 5. And the Honorable Natasha Williams has indicated present in the chat. Lastly, the Honorable Mayor.
Yes, I am
Oh, thank you.
present and on my way.
Thank you. The Honorable Mayor Khalid.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we begin, I do just want to welcome our newest department head, Mr. Tanar Turner, back to the most exciting city in America. Ladies and gentlemen, our new Parks Director, Mr. Tanar Turner. All right, Mr. Clerk, would you go ahead and sound the next item?
Yes, Mr. Mayor and Council, we are on City Manager's items, staff reports. First staff report this evening will be the Finance Monthly Report by Karen Slayton-Dixon, Finance Director.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Support. Did you get my updated slide?
Updated.
All right, so tonight I'll present the financials for 2022 for September the 30th. And on the second slide, I want to highlight a couple of items. All right, I show
If
here.
you just give us, if you, one second, we're just going to work on resizing this on the screen so we can see. We got a smaller screen than we normally have. Is there any way to bring this screen closer to the rest of us? Any technical assistance people? Also, do we have any paper copies of this presentation, or can it be emailed to council now?
I can email it.
All right, that's perfect. And then lastly, if it doesn't crash the system or maybe cause any technical difficulties, if those of you who are having problems seeing the screen, can they log into Zoom? I do see it on the computer screen on Zoom, so that might help you get a little more detail as well. Mr. Adams, will you send out that Zoom link again?
All of the documents are all.
It might also be, it's a Novus agenda, I think. It might also be in the Novus agenda. I heard that it wasn't, but we're gonna check again. And lastly, the Zoom link might, if you don't get the email right away, because I know we have a delay sometimes, you'll see it in the calendar. And you'll- okay. All right. I think we're ready to go. I'm sorry about that, Ms.
Okay.
Slade Dixon. Go ahead.
That's okay. All right, so I want to highlight a couple of items on our summary of revenues where we've collected 101% of the projected property tax. We've collected 135% of the local option sales tax, where there was a budget of $22 million. And as of September 30th, we're showing $29.7 million for local option sales tax. For our license and permits, we're showing a collection of 121%, and then 124% in charges for services. The next slide, which is our summary of expenditures. And here, as of September 30th, we're showing a 76% of budgeted funds being spent over all the departments. And on our next slide, we're talking about the general fund year-to-date tax revenue. And for the 2022, they billed out, the county did, $48.1 million. And as of September 30th, we've collected $1,163,871, so at about 2.4%. Of the 2021 taxes that were actually billed out, we actually collected 104%. So that was actually 1.2 million above what was actually billed out for 2022-21. On the next slide, we'll show our general fund year-to-date loss revenues. And then on here, we're just showing a collection of 14.5% over this time in September FY21. Overall, 21 over 22, we've collected 17.6% in lost revenues. On the next slide, we're going to see our general fund year-to-date T-SPLOS, and we're showing as of September, we collected 10.2% above this time, September 2021. Overall, 12.4% collection in T-SPLOS funds. And then this is just a general summary of our expenditures that we saw on slide number 3. And then here on this slide, the next slide, we see all our funds. So that includes the general fund as well as our capital funds. We have our URA solid waste. We show revenues overall of $131.6 million compared to our expenditures of $84.5 million. Okay, on the next slide, we talk about the confiscated asset report, and as of September 30th, that bank balance was $308,268. They've taken in $16,118 in confiscated cash, and they spent $74,902. And then as a supplemental information, this is still just reporting on our ARPA funds, where we're showing that we've actually spent $1,115,000. I said August, but excuse me, that's supposed to be September. $15,000 was from the Food Insecurity Fund, $100,000 from the Vaccine Incentive Program, $500,000 from Premium Pay Incentive, $500,000 that we used of the revenue loss for our mid-year budget report. And then here I've noted that the RFP was actually awarded to Live Stories for $1.4 million, but that will come back to be changed because that particular vendor didn't come through, so that rent and mortgage assistance program will have to be brought back before council. The South Fulton Development Authority, as of September 30th, they spent $90,985 with the revenue that the city is actually holding in the operating account of $449,675. And that concludes my September 30th financial report.
Okay, first person I see in the queue is Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you so much.
Councilwoman Willis, your audio is breaking up. Would it be possible? I'm going to come right back to you, but if it's not possible to hear you, I'm going to ask you to type your question in the queue, in the chat, and we'll have the clerk read it out. But while you're working on that, I'm going to just go quickly to Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you. Yep. Again, thank you for your presentation. I only have, I think, one question for clarity. The property tax revenue tracking over the years, you could see a little growth and a little decline, especially between 18 and 19. But between 21 and 22, there's a sizable increase from 30 million to 48 million. Can you shed some light as to what that is? I think I know what it is, but shed some light on it for us, please. Yes,
that's actually from the annexation of the Fulton Industrial Boulevard. That is where that increase come from.
And the whole of it is all 18 million is from roughly Fulton Industrial, or is there a breakdown? I will have to get a breakdown on that for you, but the majority of it is from FIB annexation. Okay. Because there was a big difference when we pretty much projected the property tax, and then the county had to come back and send us new numbers. Yeah, I figured FIB had some impact on it, but it would be nice to know. Okay, all right, I'll send you that information. If there's more than that. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Mayor, you.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question to that. I know that a number of people have contacted our office about a jump in their property taxes, which they are appealing. How does that work? Does this include that money if it's in appeals? Like I don't know how that works.
For the most part, it does. And then if there's any kind of adjustment, then the county will notify us that that amount has been adjusted. All right. Which it probably won't be a lot, just because of where we actually projected based on the digest. We didn't budget for the whole entire amount. So we left room for appeals and different things of that nature.
And I'm not sure if you know this answer or not, so if you don't, it's fine. But if someone is appealing, do they have to pay? Can they hold their payment until the appeal process is complete, or do they just have to pay the amount and get reimbursed?
I would say definitely contact the county, because of the fact they could get penalties and late fees added. So contact the county.
Thank you. All right, we're going to try again. Councilwoman Willis.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Karen Slayton-Dixon, when will we be able to see the new loss distribution to the city of South Fulton? When will we be able to see that revenue impact?
Are you speaking of where they're in negotiation now?
Yes.
Okay. We probably won't see that till after the first of the year, because if I make no mistake, they're still negotiating that process. City manager, is that right?
We're actually completed with the negotiations, okay. And I was going to discuss that in my report.
Okay, I'll wait to hear that, and I would like to see a financial analysis of that the next city council meeting in December, if that's okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that, the mayor mentioned, and I think it would be for the benefit of the public, I don't know if we can do some kind of education piece about the tax bill, because I've spent a lot of time on the phone walking people through what's on their tax bill and what part is actually attributed to the city, which in most instances is the smaller part of their tax bill. And so Do you think that's something your office can do in partnership with the communications department?
Yes, yes, we can do that, because we can just have the revenue manager get with communications. and do
Okay,
that.
I think that would be very helpful to people.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further, you have something? Yeah, we're using, I don't see you in my notes, but go ahead. My internet is also going in and out. But-
Ms. Slayton Dixon, thank you for your presentation. Quick question. I see in the report in regards to the west side and the east side tag, on slide 8, it shows that, no, I'm sorry, on slide 4, it shows that there was a revenue of 111,000 for the west side TAD, and then also too for the east side TAD, it shows 38,000. But on slide 8, there's a difference. There's 103,000 for the west side, and then 34,000. I don't know if that's a discrepancy, or can you explain the difference in the numbers? And that's on slide 8.
Right, okay. And so on the first slide that you talked about the 111,664. That's actually what they actually billed out.
Okay.
So the other slide that's showing this, the 34,390 and 103,251 is the actual revenue that the city has actually received
Okay.
for
Okay.
those.
That's my only question. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, anyone else? Seeing and hearing none other. Mr. Clerk, please sound the next item.
And for the record, I believe Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem Reeves has joined us. Did he join the meeting as well? The next item on the agenda is the City Manager Monthly Report by Tammy Sadler-Jones, City Manager.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, Mayor and Council, residents of the City of South Fulton. Tammy Sadler-Jones, City Manager. I did send my City Manager monthly report notes to the Council on November the 10th. The first thing I did want to go over was the local option sales tax. A unified effort by the cities in Fulton County resulted in convincing Fulton County government to reduce its original demand of 35% each year, which would have resulted in over $1.3 billion to an average of 9.98% over 10 years for a projected total of just under $384 million. The county's percentage will increase annually beginning in 2023 at 5%, followed by 6%, 7.15%, 8.75%, 10.25%, 11%, 12%, 12.5%, 12.5%, and 12.5%, all the way until 2032. Without the county's signature, the loss would terminate at the end of this year, losing over $3.8 billion used to roll back property taxes for all property owners in Fulton County. Money that is used to offset the cost of essential governmental services. This outcome was averted by the collective efforts of the city leaders within Fulton County, cities. The cities agreed to divide the remaining $3.45+ billion equally, while still ensuring no city lost revenue from their 2021 revenue amounts. 2021 lost revenue amounts. Loss negotiations have concluded. All cities will need to approve the loss percentages. We will need to execute the final certificate consistent with those percentages, and then an official Department of Revenue certificate will need to be submitted, and that will be submitted by our attorney that is representing the cities. And so for the city of South Fulton particularly, we will begin to see about $31 million collections, and again, these are estimates, beginning in 2023. And of course, our percentages will continue to go up. We can provide this information. We've sent everything to the mayor and council that has been provided to us, and we can send that information to you again. This particular item is on the agenda for approval, and staff does recommend approval based upon the negotiations, and your negotiation team consisted of myself, Dr. Catherine Foster Rowell, and attorney Vincent Hyman. The next thing I wanted to talk about was our CFO, Karen Slayton-Dixon, mentioned to you that the council did approve the rental and mortgage assistance vendor. However, that vendor has had some challenges in submitting their required insurance, and we have given them multiple deadlines to submit that information. And so it is staff recommendation in our purchasing department that we award the bid to the next highest bidder. And so we will be working with our attorney's office to rescind the bid for the bidder. It's called Forward. That's who you guys voted on back in September. And then we will put the information on the agenda to go with the next bidder who has provided proof that they can provide to us the required insurance amount. On yesterday, we had our push-in event over at the fire department. We pushed in another fire engine over at fire station number 11, and they also had an awards day ceremony, so we congratulate our fire personnel who received awards on yesterday. And the mayor has already mentioned to you our new Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs Director, Mr. Tenard Turner. So we welcome him. Today is his first day, and he has a lot of work to do, so we look forward to working with him. And other than that, Mayor, I know we have a lot on the agenda, but I did want to remind the public that next month, December the 13th, we have again our combined meeting as a result of the major holidays. And so on Tuesday, we will do another in-person meeting here at the Welcome All Multipurpose Room. The work session will begin at 4 p.m. The zoning public hearings will begin at 6 p.m. and the city council meeting will begin at 7 p.m. So again, out of the interest of time, the other items are within my report.
All right, thank you. The queue is open. I'm going to start with Councilwoman Willis. I know that you were holding a question for the city manager's report.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Mrs. Sally Jones, I would like to ask that going forward, can you please, or have someone on your staff, give us a way that we could determine when RFPs go out for solicitation, or give us notification when that happens, so that we can govern ourselves as elected officials accordingly. Once solicitations, go out, it's a quiet period, and we have to govern ourselves accordingly as it relates to vendors. And we don't know when solicitations go out on the street because we're not notified. And there's no centralized place that we can go and look for this information. And so I want to put on the record that this city council and the mayor needs to be notified when RFP solicitations go out, or there needs to be some type of centralized location that will send us notifications when stuff like this happens.
Yes, ma'am.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Anyone else think you have anything? All right. Go ahead, Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Madam City Manager, thank you for your report. I I have one question around the lost monies, because I know based on the average and looking at the numbers presented in your report, over the 10 years, look like we would average about $38 million, according to that 384 million that I saw. So despite, the negotiations, no one leaves happy, or as happy as they think they were going in. But do you foresee right now any adverse impact on our residential taxes because of how these lost negotiations came out?
If I understand your question correctly, I don't see any adverse impact. As a matter of fact, I think it benefits our residents that we were able to complete the negotiations and complete them to a point where all of the cities were able to be held harmless.
So we're not going to be able to we're not going to go back to our residents and say we didn't get enough money from loss, so we have to raise your taxes.
I don't expect that. No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other questions. So 2 quick comments. I actually want to amplify Councilwoman Willis's concern. We talked about this in our weekly meetings, but there has been some concern from the community about not knowing when the RFPs are out or hit the street or where to find them. I think it would be really helpful if on the city's website, if they can just go to the procurement page and all of the RFPs for all of the projects are listed, as well as whatever steps are needed for someone to become a vendor or submit a request. That way, anybody who's looking, it will be in a centralized place for everyone.
Mayor, if you don't
Yes.
mind, I'll respond to that. So if you have your computer up, if you go to our main page.
I'm actually trying to go there now.
Okay,
Our
all right.
internet.
At the very center of the page, right below the picture of actually Lieutenant Williams, there is a tab that we added as a result of our meeting that says bids/solicitation. And if anybody from the public is interested in doing business with the city, I encourage you to go to www.cityofsouthfultonga.gov. And again, it's right below the picture. I think it's over to the far right, and it says bids/solicitation.
Okay.
Also, if you're interested in being a vendor, I believe on the very top of the website, on the main page, it says, Mayor, you see it?
I got the main page up now. Where are we
Okay.
going?
Right, you see that tab at the far right-hand side?
My Zoom is in the way.
Oh,
Bids,
I'm looking at
proposals,
the-
I see it right here.
Okay,
Right
yep.
up under the sign here.
I'm sorry, whose computer am I looking at?
Mine.
Oh, okay, all right.
Mine. I
All
see it
right.
right here. Bids, proposals, it's a little circle there, yes.
Yep, and that will take you to our list, and then if you go up to the top, oh, you're on the bids page.
It went right to the bid page.
Yes. And then if you go back to our city website, if you go up to the top, it should says how to become a vendor.
Is it one of these under, how do I, is it under how do I, or resources for business?
Now I have to look it up. I just looked at it today and it says how to become a vendor, so.
Open records, virtual court, file. Maybe we put it under how do I apply for? Well, we'll find it, but I do want,
You see at the banner that says, can you scroll down a little bit? Go up to the very top of the website where it says open records request.
Yes.
Municipal code, employment,
Become
become
a
a
vendor.
vendor. Yes, sir.
Thank you. So for those of
Okay.
you all who are watching online, it's right there on the homepage, and then all of our bids are. Thank you so much for that quick response. Yeah, I think that's excellent. So now everybody, you know where the bids are, you know where to find them. Thank you. And then the last thing, I want to just give a special thanks, not only to our negotiation team, but to all of the mayors. throughout this process have been in constant communication and it's been a very collegial environment amongst the mayors, including the mayor of our sister city, my brother Andre Dickens. Thank you for just the fellowship that all of you all have shown, and the way that we have stuck together now twice, first beginning with the CARES Act through ARP and now LOST. I think that we are really charting a new course forward of partnership across all of Fulton County and all of the mayors. So I just want to say thank you for that. And with that, Mr. Clerk, please sound the next item.
Next item is item 3.
I'm in the queue.
Councilman Willis says she's in the queue.
Councilman Willis.
Thank you for recognizing me. I just don't want us to get confused. Thanks for recognizing me. I don't want us to get confused. My request is regarding notifying the elected officials when solicitations go out. We should not have to constantly go out on the website and look to see solicitations. I'm asking the city manager's office to direct staff when solicitations go out, if they could notify us, or if there's a way that we can sign up to alert us when things go out so that we can govern ourselves accordingly. Because once those solicitations go out, we are not supposed to be we're supposed to govern ourselves accordingly in discussions. And I just want to make sure that we are put in the proper position to do that.
Yes, ma'am, I heard you the first time, so we will notify you.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
All right, Mr. Clerk, please sound the next item.
Right, the next item is listed as number 3 on the Roman numeral 3, recommendation to create. I'm sorry, did you want to say anything about Public Works, or that the reports are in the agenda package, or?
Mr. Valenzuela is available, but yes, the Public Works updates as requested by the council were included in the agenda packet. But he's here to give an overview of specific items that have been of interest to the council, but we realize we don't have a whole lot of time, so he was just going to choose specific items.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Valenzuela? Okay, come forward. We do have one question. While he comes forward, I do just want to commend Public Works. You know, we've had some deadly accidents on Enon Road in District 1, and I was out there last night. We've already put strips out there. We're doing a traffic study, so we have heard your concerns. We are trying to respond quickly to these incidents as they happen. So that traffic study is in process. Thank you so much, Public Works, Lowe's, and everyone else who's a part of that project. Go ahead, Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Valenzuela, thank you very much. I know that you have taken on a huge task. Now that the department is, fully internal. And I just want to thank you again for continuing to pay a little bit more attention to District 4. I've gotten comments that the district is looking cleaner, so we'll just keep our fingers crossed that we can continue to do that. Also, I believe I emailed you, and you guys are in the process of doing a study on Cedar Grove Road, right? Do you have any timetable as to when you think that will be complete? That's my first question. Because there are lots of complaints about people having issues getting out of those subdivisions along Cedar Grove Road between Rivertown and South Fulton Parkway, right?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, City Manager, and residents of the City of South Fulton. With regards to your question, Council Sebastian, we're addressing actually Cedar Grove, Enon Road, Butner Road and so on, and other corridors that where we receive concerns on the speeding and so on. At this point, we're doing traffic counts. Typically, it's done on a Tuesday and Thursdays of the week. We don't do any traffic counts during vacation or holidays because that throws off the counts. I'm forecasting that a study should be completed the first of the year, and we'll be definitely getting back with you on the findings of this, the speed studies that we have.
Okay. And my second thing is just asking for an update on the projects that we're doing through GDOT, that they're spread out across the city, that the funding is sitting at ARC for us.
Yes, sir. I owe you a report, a specific report for Cochran Road over Kemp Creek for Old National Highway Phase 2 sidewalks, and for the New Hope Road sidewalks. Those three projects are going to be led to construction in 2023. At this point, as this afternoon, we were working with consultants to ensure that we're not missing any deadlines as required by PDP due to those three projects following federal funds. The city has secured on the budget for 23 the 20% match that we're responsible for each of those projects. We're working very diligently to ensure that we commit the right-of-way certification by March of this year. And in order to provide you a firm date when the project will be led to construction, we're working with Georgia DOT to fill in and ensure that we meet the deadlines that they require from us as well, as we still have to provide some final field plan reviews and receive final comments from them. But so far the projects are on the schedule. We most likely are going to have to request additional funding for those three projects. We still have an opportunity and asking our consultants to review and update the final estimated cost due to the price increases that we expect that we're experiencing on the last months.
So finally, and this is just because I've had a lot of questions from residents about it, the roundabout at Rivertown Road and Cedar Grove Road. I noticed from your report, you're going to let it for construction in January. Is that still the case? So I did see the engineers out there doing their surveys, I think about a week ago.
So I just want to make sure that when we put letting, it is the projected date for advertising of the project. Mm-hmm. That's a common term that we use on the transportation industry. So it's still projected to start advertising the project on that date that we have in the report.
Okay, so it'll be several months after that before we see construction.
I will say 4 to 5 months.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, you.
Are these people in the queue for this? All right, Councilwoman Willis. Okay, Councilwoman Rowell.
Thank you. I'm not going to steal the thunder since I have a town hall meeting on Thursday, but there are a number of people who I've asked about and want to update on Sandtown Rec Center, so if you could at least just touch on that one. As you know, we have quite a few traffic studies underway in District 1, but if you could at least just touch on the updates with the Rec Center.
With regards to the Sandtown Rec Center, we have completed the installation of the HVAC system at the center. We are on the final punch list that we want to make sure that everything is working. So far, we haven't noticed that some discrepancies with the installation or so. Today it rained. We're looking into any roof leaks because the units are on top of the roof. No major reports. With regards to the new
I'm good. I'm fine. Thank you.
mold remediation, we put an ITV out. We are actually answering some questions. We expect that the ITV open up, it will open in the next 30 days. That ITV scope of work is very detailed. It encompasses, besides rectifying the mold issues, we have painting of the interior, painting of the ceiling, replacement of the gymnasium flooring, some flooring of the gymnasium, and some wall painting as well as the outside painting of that particular venue.
Thank you. I thought that was really important because one thing we want to make sure before we bring anybody back in that building is that it's safe. And thank you for the work. I know me and you and the mayor met on this earlier this week, and so I'm just wanted the public to understand that work is being done and is moving forward, and we're looking forward to having the gym and the rec center back open.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And just to piggyback off of that and follow up, next month, we decided we'd give Mr. Turner, since he just got here today, we wouldn't put him on the agenda the day he walked in. But next month, we're going to have an in-depth presentation about all of our parks and where they're headed and what our plans are for next spring and summer and fall.
So if you don't mind, I can provide also a couple of projects that we have that's on the works that are high importance for the city and especially for Councilwoman Gomes and Councilwoman Willis as well. The roundabout the dual roundabout at Button and Stonewall Tail, we're making a lot of progress, and we hope that rain goes away. We have a lot of people working on the site, and we're doing everything we can to complete the project before the end of the year. We're working with Greystone to bring the lights at those dual roundabouts. We're also going to put pretty nice decorative planting on the two roundabouts as well. We hope that we can do the last week of November, first week of December. So we're anticipating a very nicer project, and that should help with lots of the congestion and traffic ordering at that location. With regards to this venue on URA, we also discussed this one. Contractor has made decent progress on the sandblasting of the trusses. They started doing welding this past Monday, and they have worked through the past weekend to include Veterans Day and so on. And after this one, we should be coming up into priming and painting the trusses and hopefully being able to finalize the skylight roofing and then remove the scaffolding so we can move on with the slides and other items that are pending at Welcome All. With regards to the last project that you all were inquiring about it, and the community as well, the Campbellton and Stonewall Tail. The project was bid out. We received the bids. Now we have done a bid analysis, and we'll be presenting back for council approval on the most responsive lowest bidder on the next council meeting that's scheduled, I believe, for December 13th.
Your question, Councilwoman Gomes? Go ahead. Well, you're in the queue next. Knock it out.
Well, first, I do want to thank you, Mr. Valenzuela, for getting those items taken care of, and especially for last night, having the call with Cliftondale. I know that was very challenging, but I do appreciate you actually providing the update to the community. You mentioned about Butner and Stonewall Tail, the lighting and the you call them lane markers or something of
yes.
that nature. So just letting you know, I sent it out in my newsletters of pictures of where those improvements have been, because we were getting complaints from residents saying that it was too dark, they didn't know how to navigate the roundabout. So as time moves forward, we'll learn how to navigate the roundabout. As you can see with Boat Rock, it took a while to get it down packed, but people are actually learning how to use it. So the lights will definitely help. Also, too, I want people to know that we are really focusing on trying to get people to not speed in our city. I know that there has been significant and very horrific accidents, and a lot of them are contributed to speed. We have very windy roads that is very dark. It's a lot of vegetation, possibly covering lights and things of that nature. So Councilwoman Rowell and myself have actually been trying to champion a way to lower the speed limit. Now, I know that's not the biggest thing that everybody want to do, especially with our police chief and our public works, but we are taking on that challenge to actually lower the speed limit. And that is where the traffic study has been generated. That was, I believe you initiated that on November the 7th, so we'll be looking forward to the response from that. But I wanted residents to know that we are actively, pushing to find a way to make our roads safer. As you can see, there's been some improvements, especially in District 2 and in District 3 and District 1, where you have the flashing stop signs in those dark areas. So I just want residents, if you're traveling throughout the city, see those improvements, and it should let you know that there's some comfort that your council is actually activating and making sure that we hear your concerns. So I just want residents to know that. But slow down, please. And I shared last night in one of the calls that that family that perished, I think it was about 4 people at Union and Butner. That was my colleague's niece. So it's difficult to be sitting in this position knowing that, you know, we are trying to do better as far as keeping our roads safe. You know, it's hard to look at somebody you work with every single day and knowing that, you know, their family member lost their life because, you know, of our windy roads. And, you know, so I just wanted to share that again, but that's all I wanted. You have been working very hard to improve. So I just want you to know that last night I felt your pain, and we're here to support as much as we can.
Thank you. I just wanted to add and ensure that Mayor and Council knows that the 28 speed readers that you approved about 2 months ago, that were installed this week. So now we're in the process of making that live. We're going to provide to you a clear report of where those speed readers are. I know we installed at Butt Rock, we installed at Butner Road, we installed at Bethsaida Road, and so on. You will have a report of where those are. We're going to be rotating those speed readers. It's going to help us out to measure the speeds on the roads, and as well as do traffic counts that we have for 1 year as a free service due to the installation of those gadgets. So that's another way of doing traffic calming for the city, and we'll be coming with more stuff. Just allow us a bit more time, and I'm sure we'll have better results soon.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for that, because I did get a phone call from my daughter and was like, I think I got a ticket from seeing the speed reader. So it's working.
We'll know that.
All right, Councilwoman Willis, are we back up? All right, Councilwoman Willis.
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Mr. Manzuelas, for meeting with the community yesterday. I just want to put on the record, one of the main things that the community is asking for is, you know, we need project, and I'll direct this to the city manager. We need project plans. We need project completions plans with milestones. And when those milestones change, we need to be able to go back to the community and let them know projects won't be ready in March, they'll be ready in June, and here is why. What has happened is that we have given updates to the community, and here we are, in some cases 2 years later, and nothing has been reported back to the community why we are here 2 years later without the roundabout, or without any traffic calming, or without any, any improvements to our dangerous intersections. We can change the speed all day long. The speed on Highway 285 is 65 miles per hour. But you try to go 65 miles per hour if you want to on 285, and you might not be here today. What I think it's a comprehensive approach. We are going to have to educate people to slow down, but we also need to get these traffic calming devices and our intersection improvements going in our dangerous intersections. The problem is sometimes people come up on intersections and don't realize that they're at a stop. They should stop. You know, we are in an area where there are a lot of winding roads. We inherited this problem, and we have a lot of public work projects in place, a lot of roundabouts that are underway. But we got to make sure that we educate our community and keep them up to the breast when there are changes in our public work projects. And that is the main takeaway I took away from that, Ms. Sally Jones. I gave the community information that was given to me on when we're going to start construction and when we're going to have right-of-way completion done. And then we're 2 years later out, and all of those dates have changed for whatever reason. And so the community is very apprehensive to believe any new dates that are given to them, because here we are 2 years later when they have been given dates and nothing has happened. So I beg of you to get with staff and get these project plans with milestones updated. And if we can, please let us try to stick to these milestones and these project plans. And when things change, we have to let our community know what's going on.
Thank you, Councilwoman Willis. Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to agree and support my colleagues in terms of even appealing to our residents that they have a role to play in how they drive on our streets, because yes, we want and we're in the process of improving some of this stuff, but it's not going to happen overnight. And every time we go on the road and we, do things, I got passed on the left side as I was trying to make a left turn 2 days ago, right? So could have been in the hospital today. Had a friend who was campaigning on the side of the road, minding her own business, and is no pass because of speeding with other people. So it's not only when we do these things we affect ourselves and our own families, but innocent people get hurt in the process. So that's why I really asked the mayor to let us have an overall discussion in January around transportation. And whatever my colleagues are doing, I'll find out more from them and join that effort as well. Because I think we have a lot of work to do here, but we have a lot of education to do as well with our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilman Sebastian. Seeing no one else in the queue, Mr. Clerk, please sound the next item.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we are on number 3 of Roman numeral 3, recommendation to create a City of South Fulton Building Inspections Division as part of the Community Development Department. I believe this is being presented by Mr. Derek Hull, Director, Community Development Regulatory Affairs.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Derek Hull reporting on behalf of Community Development Regulatory Affairs Department. Back in September, near the end of the fiscal year, I came before this honorable body to present some unpaid invoices related to the services that are being rendered by CAA, which are the building services for the City of South Fulton. And I think in that amount, Mayor and Council so graciously approved the expenditure amount to transfer general fund revenues to cover the invoices for the services that have been rendered. During that time, however, it was requested of the city manager to bring back a proposal to consider bringing these services in-house. As you know, since 2017, the city has contracted the building services out, and there was an express interest to make sure that we look internally to see if we could expand the Community Development and Regulatory Affairs Department to include a city division of building services. So what I have for you today is a report back related to what it would look like to create an internal building division. As it relates to just some of the general activities, understanding the building division, they play a vital role in ensuring the public safety, health, and welfare. There are certain compliances with the building code that the individuals that are charged in that division are responsible for adhering and making sure that the city is enforcing. The permitting process is by far one of the main activities of the staff, and it's critical that not only they coordinate with property owners, and these are residents as well as commercial establishments, but they also coordinate across the city related to interacting with various departments as they carry out their day-to-day functions. Inspections are a critical component to a building division in making sure that we can promptly respond to individuals who are needing inspections, whether it's for a residence or for a commercial establishment. And then obviously working with contractors and providing staff and even members, elected officials, and community members if there are some interpretations, some code interpretations related to some of the more technical aspects of this building profession. And so what we have before us is a proposal to look at if we were to consider establishing a building division, the components of what would be included. The first person that you would want to establish or you would want to have would be a building official. And this is a manager level position that is considered the officer and has the designated authority related to the duties of overseeing all of the building functions for the city. And then secondly, considering having a senior building inspector, which is a supervisor level that would oversee the activities of the building inspectors, which are the entry-level positions in the building industry, making sure that there's time and attention given to the individuals who are seeking inspections and permittings and the like. Just to kind of give you an idea, this information that is in the staff report was captured by the consultants that we currently have, and it provided some general statistics related to our permitting process. So for the month of October, the city issued approximately 218 permits. I have to apologize. I am trying to read without my glasses. And as I've learned after I turned 50, my eyesight is not as good as it used to be. So let me just enlarge the font on my computer. As it relates to the new single-family dwelling units, we issued 85. The total amount of fees collected for the month of October was $380,000. There were approximately 114 plan reviews that were conducted. And so when you look at this in totality, the amount of development that was that the building division engaged in the month of October was around $37 million. And that included construction on the residential, the commercial, and the industrial side. So again, if it is the desire of mayor and council to create a building division, staff is recommending the following transition plan to make sure that we can provide the needed support for the community as we transition out and ensure a smooth transition as it relates to the ongoing services that we will need to provide. And so that schedule kind of looks at starting in the month of November with my department and HR finalizing the job descriptions for the previous positions that I listed. In December, council would fund the positions. We've identified at least 4. And then through December and February, HR opens up an active recruitment for the positions within the building division. March through June, the building division staff, the newly recruited staff would work alongside of our consultants just to make sure that there is going to be a transition. And then by July of 2023, the city would wind down the contract with our current consultants that are providing the service. And in consultation with HR and having had some previous conversations with our finance director, we are confident that we can fund the 4 positions right around $450,000. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that as we were looking at these positions, we did some research related to the average salaries in Georgia for these types of positions. And so on the low end, for your typical building inspectors, they range from 57,000 to approximately 80,000. And that might be a little bit generous for a building official, but on average in the state of Georgia, these are what the ranges of salary positions are. So again, as it relates to Mayor and Council's request, I think I speak for the city manager in saying we understood what the request was. We made a commitment to come back to this body in November, and we are happy to supply and provide you with this information related to the establishment of a building division.
All right, I'm going to open the queue up for questions, and I'll be checking in the chat too as I'm waiting for them to come in. I'm going to just start with a concern and some questions. I know this may be council's desire. I know that the bills that we got were jarring, but I'm just going to remind us right now that there's a saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. We have a lot of things that are clearly broken that we are already trying to fix. And so I just want to make sure that we are not taking on more than we can chew. We already are in this budget setting up a public works department, creating a citywide sanitation service, setting up a public affairs, external affairs thing, and then there's a couple other things that we're doing, the Parks Master Plan, the URA. There's a lot that we already have going on. My first question, and is anyone from CAA here? Okay, because this might be, you all might tag team on this, but has there been, I know that there has been some concern amongst our constituents about how quickly we were processing permits. Did that have anything to do with the inspector or the inspections, or was that a separate issue? How quickly, when someone submits a permit, how quickly are you all at CAA getting that site inspected and getting that report back?
I think the typical turnaround for CAA is within 1 day.
Within 1 day. So the holdup and the permits wasn't necessarily anything to do with the inspect. Is there, I guess the question that I'm asking is, other than the bill, which I understand we don't like, have there been any challenges in the process? Have there been any holdups, problems with people getting permits, problems with payment, or, all of the things that we've heard that people from businesses and individuals about how difficult it is sometimes to get a permit in this city? That doesn't have anything to do with this process. This process is fine.
That response, Mr. Mayor, requires me to look kind of globally at what I have assessed since I've been here in May. It's very situational. And I think members of council may have had experiences related to building services in general, which is what prompted this particular request through the city manager's office. In most situations, a single incident can grow, but when you look at services kind of collectively, there have been some challenges as it relates to providing some services, and not only some services, but services to the satisfaction of what we would want to provide as a municipal government.
Okay. You suggested 1 manager and 3 inspectors. Is that correct? You said a total of 4 people. 1 of them would be a manager and 3 would be building inspectors.
So 1 would be a building official, which is a manager level position. The second person would be a senior inspector, which is at a supervisory position, still obviously going out doing the work, and then 2 building inspectors. What I failed to mention is that this is kind of if we were to engage in establishing this division, this would be our starting point, and then as we progress the next 6 months we would assess where we are to determine if we would need to have additional staff. But
Okay. Great. So three people in the street. And that's 450. That's what you're estimating. Is that currently in the budget, or would we have to do some sort of budget adjustment or pull that out of contingency?
we would have to do a budget amendment. This
Okay.
isn't in the budget. It was not included when we did the budget presentation in August.
Any idea where that 450 might come from?
There are a couple of ideas where it could come from. The Community Development and Regulatory Affairs Department has a current line item for professional services. A portion of the salary could be funded for that, from that line item. That's the line item that's currently being used to pay for the professional services contract for CAA.
Okay, and the 450, does that include vehicles and equipment, insurance? I mean, I know there's a lot to setting up a department besides the salaries. Does it include those things?
It includes all the personnel costs and the associated costs related to the staff. We are actually in the midst of talking with Public Works and internally through the city manager's office, assessing our needs for vehicles, and then we'll identify the vehicles that we will need for our current staff and then for any future staff.
So on top of this 450, there may be some additional, because they're going to be riding around the city, there may be some additional costs. My last question is, I understand that you can have, well, there are a couple things. Because we are contracting with CAA now, when there is an influx of permits, when building is going up, they can quickly like add staff and reduce staff, maybe faster than we could if we hire a set or a fixed number of staff. In your opinion, you know, we have this historic inflation coming. Everyone is saying that there's going to be a recession. We may see a decline in building permits. So are 3 people on the street, is that a conservative number considering what might happen, and we might have to add more people if it doesn't happen, or might we have to let some of those people go if the building permits slow down?
That's a very good question, and part of why, as a part of the fiscal impact, or the area before the fiscal impact, as we're providing the proposed schedule, we say specifically wind down the contract. So it's not necessarily a termination, but it might just be after we get our individuals up to speed and make sure that the transition of the day-to-day operations occurs with staff, that we decrease our dependency on our current contractor.
All right, and these are commercial and residential building inspectors.
These are inspectors in general.
Inspectors in general.
And they handle any type of inspection for any type of building, any type of structure.
And I was educated this week. I wasn't aware that there's a separate land development inspector for the subdivision. So outside of the building of the homes in the subdivision, the streets or the sewers or the landscaping, all of that is done by land development inspectors. And those folks are already in-house with us now.
Correct.
All right, and how many of those do we have for our city?
We have 3.
Okay. Last question. Would these, I know that sometimes inspectors have specialties, right? They're electrical inspectors, they're plumbing inspectors. I'm assuming because we're only going to have 3, they would all be cross-trained or on multiple disciplines.
They can be. That's certainly something that we're going to have to look at in terms of making sure that as the number of permits that are pulled, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, that those specialty areas, as we call them, can be addressed and met by the staff that we're looking to hire.
All right, thank you. I'm going to yield to Councilwoman Willis. Are you in the queue? I see it.
Mr. Mayor,
actually,
the queue is right here.
I am in the queue. Thank you for recognizing me. First of all, I am going to thank Mr. Derek Hull for being the ultimate professional and being modest. Let me point this one question to Ms. Sala Jones. Ms. Sala Jones, how long have I been coming to you about us transitioning this municipal service in-house? And why did I come to you about this?
If I recall correctly, I do remember the conversation coming up when we were putting together the budget for fiscal year '22. And
okay.
You had come to...
I asked... Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say you had come to me in regards to the fee that we were paying our contractor.
So, I asked at the time for Ms. Rachel Bimry, I asked these pointed questions. How much did the city generate in building permits and fiscal 21 fees, and what is the projection for fiscal 22? Recorded, we had 2.3 million that had generated in fiscal 21. She projected in fiscal year 2022 that we were going to record 3.5 million. What I asked is, how much was our vendor being paid? Of that 2.3 million, our vendor was being paid 1.69 million, 50% of the building revenue that we generated. And then I asked, because I couldn't believe it. I was like, so 50% of the revenue, which is, we generate close to $2.5 million, and 50% of that revenue is walking out the door or paying the vendor. And that was confirmed. Am I correct, Mr. Hull?
Yes, ma'am, you're correct.
So I'm just trying to figure out how that makes sense. Number one, it is broke, because why would I want to generate millions of dollars and then give $1 million to somebody else to do a job when I can transition that service in, hire staff for a fraction of that cost? Then let's not talk about some of the inefficiencies that we found in the process. Now, I don't want to put a lot of this out, but maybe it should come out, because Mr. Hull is being modest. But in the building permitting process, we have found things that bonds that were released that shouldn't have been. We have found inefficiencies. We've been on the news where builders were, permitted to continue and finish out construction, and certain things should not have been permitted. The first problem is 50% of our revenue going out the door. And number two, if we hire our own staff, we can hold them more accountable. We can hold them more accountable for things that are happening in the city when certain things are not done, or certain processes are not done during the building permit process. So for 2 years, I've known this information and asked Ms. Sala Jones, why is it that we don't have a plan to transition the service in-house and hire our own staff? Number one, to prevent 50% of our revenue from going out the door. So now we're talking about inflation and we're talking about costs. I mean, why would we let $1 million continue to walk out the door? The other thing is, if we can't hold vendors accountable as much as we can hold our own staff accountable. So when I sat down with Ms. Sala Jones, and then when I sat down with Mr. Hull, it just made sense to come up with a plan to transition this service in-house, so that our residents and our customers can get better service. And number two, so we can start sending half of our revenue out the door. I yield.
Thank you. Councilwoman Williams.
You have already asked what I was going to ask, so I will not be redundant.
Thank you. Dr. Rowell.
Thank you. Mr. Hull, as we begin to plan for a transition, do you foresee any issues with recruitment and attracting the skills? I know a lot of cities are having a hard time recruiting professionals. I go look at other cities and they have long lists of jobs. It's not just unique to the city of South Fulton. Can you speak to that? And I think I like what you said, that we have a fallback if we're not able and we need to tap some expertise. So can you share a little bit about what you're thinking and how we're going to staff up, even though it's only 4? It could be a lot.
I can, and let me just reflect, if you will, my own experience in coming to the city of South Fulton. Sometimes it's hard to see yourself when you are of the community. I've said this before, and I'll say it until whenever is my last day, and that is I have an instant love affair with the city. And I think that the types of incentives that we offer individuals, if we make sure that our salaries are competitive, and we continue to really be about the business of the city, you will have no problems in attracting people. As you all know, the pandemic has created a myriad of issues just in terms of personnel across the world. So there might be initially some challenges in trying to get people on board, but Atlanta is a large metropolitan area. We have building degree programs here at Georgia Tech. I'm not sure about AUC, but certainly at Georgia Tech, University of Georgia. And so pulling individuals who are newly graduates of those programs, and, you know, the city manager and I always talk about our colleagues. The assistant city manager and I talk about our colleagues across Metro Atlanta. And while we respect them, if we find interest in some staff wanting to move locations, move municipalities, we will extend a helpful and a friendly hand. So I say all that to say it might be a challenge initially, but I think with the right progressive marketing and then specific targeting of where we know individuals reside and where the interests are, we should be able to recruit.
Thank you for that. I've thought about 2 transitions we've done lately, one being Public Works, and I know everybody was up in arms and nervous about that, and that's been pretty seamless for the most part. And of course you can anticipate hiccups with anything, but I like the approach that this is not something that we're rushing into, so we take our time and we get it right. So thank you for that.
Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you touched on it, the plan, the backup plan to supplement your department, right? So I would really love to see that being presented at some point. And it might be a modular plan, right? As you get to achieving certain goals, certain stuff, you know, change the economy, as well as with the level of building, because you sound like this staff can only work with District 4. Okay? So I know you're going to have your challenge in terms of not only finding enough people, but keeping up with, you know, sort of the developments that are coming across the city. Okay? Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor and members of council, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, and this was probably discussed during the budget presentation, as we saw the increases in the interest rates, and we realized the situation of our city. For those of us who have purchased property, for those of us who understand the aspects of lending, I had discussed with the city manager, the finance director, that it's my anticipation that with the rising interest rates, we're going to start to see a decline in our building revenue. Just because, quite frankly, African Americans are less likely to be approved for a loan. I mean, and we know that. It's shameful for us to say that in 2022, but that is the case. And we are, as you know, a predominantly African-American community. And so I suspect that, and that's probably why a lot of developers are anxious to get their things done. If and when the interest rates continue to increase, it will affect the overall numbers related to the permits that we're issuing. And that could be good, that could be bad. On the good side, it'll give us the chance to build a division, to kind of recalibrate and see where we are, and then make those adjustments. Our dynamic finance director accounted for that potential loss in our budget. We kind of assumed that, and we kind of had some conversations about it between she, the assistant city manager, and the city manager and I about the realities of what we can expect when we just don't know what the feds are going to do related to the interest rates.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying that, because I think that a lot of the problems that we are seeing in our subdivisions now are the result of people rushing to build things in 2006 and 2007. The market fell out, and we have all of these half-built subdivisions, and then people are coming in to do phase 2, phase 3, and like it's been an issue. So I do think that that's something that we should be thinking about globally. I'm looking at the fee schedule, which we really didn't touch on here. Are the fees, does this new fee schedule, and this will be my question for all of these things that all of these departments that we're setting up, all of these things, all these initiatives that we have, does the new fee schedule consider what it is that we're trying to do in setting up this department so that it can absorb some of the costs that we have? That's my first question. And my second question is not all the way related to it, because I think this is more land development, but I don't see impact fees in this fee schedule. So you just talk about that.
If I could start with the second item first.
Yes.
So, and I'm only smiling because I have absolutely promised the city manager and the assistant city manager that we will have an RFP before the end of the year on development impact fees. And that is forthcoming. Week or two, and it was so duly noted earlier that when we do release that RFP, we'll make sure that it's available for the public to review. But the development impact fees are forthcoming. We're going to start out with an RFP and then go through the process, because, as you well know, this city is probably one of the top cities in metropolitan Atlanta with the amount of development. I keep telling members of council that I'm developing this list of your top 10 projects, and every time I get the list complete, I have to add some additional projects because it's just that much development, from small subdivisions to major development projects that are going to have a lasting impact on all of Metro Atlanta. That list is forthcoming, by the way. But I will say that is something that we're going to be dealing with. Related to the fee schedule and for the building division, in this particular proposal that we're bringing, we did not make any changes because as we did the review of other communities, our building permit fees are in line with many of the other communities. But that doesn't mean, Mr. Mayor, that we will not come back in another year or two because, as you all know, the cost of everything is rising, and so we have to adjust as the costs adjust.
Thank you for that. Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, is it true or is it not true that we are generating close to $2.5 million currently, and that's on the low side because you did say that we may generate less? Is it or is not true we're generating close to, let's say, $2 million in building permit fees?
At least, council member. At least $2 million.
Mr. Hall, is it or is it not true that we are currently paying a vendor 50% of the revenue that we're generating in building permit fees? So we're currently paying a vendor $1 million of the $2 million that we're generating?
So our split for that is for the first $100,000 for any associated building permits, we pay the contractor 45% of that total amount. When it exceeds the permit value exceeds $100,000, then we pay the contractor 50%. So that's a split revenue share 50-50 between the contractor and the city above 100,000.
So to start up a department, around about how much would it cost? Just give me a ball. Would you say 300,000, 400,000?
We're estimating anywhere between 450 to about 500,000. We were
okay.
We wanted to be conservative. So 450,000.
So so I'm gonna break this down. We're generating about 2 million. We're paying out about $1 million. If we were to transition this department in, it would cost us about 500,000. So therefore, we'll be 500,000 to the good. Am I correct?
At least.
I yield.
All right. Seeing no further questions, Mr. Clerk, please sound the next item.
Next item is item number 4, update city initiatives aligned with strategic plan. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. October was a busy month as it relates to media relations for our communications department. I would like to acknowledge that the department was responsible for submitting a nomination that helped our code enforcement director, Brian Morris, earn the Turnkey Solutions Citizens Champion Award. The team also posted and distributed 20 news releases and media advisories from October 1st through November 1st. And I wanted to highlight that coverage and how it relates to our strategic plan. The first one was South Fulton Fire and Police combine expertise, technology to find house fire calls. That relates to strategic plan goal number 3, increase community collaboration and quality of life. We got coverage from Channel 11, Atlanta First News, and Fox 5. The second one, South Fulton buys 9 acres on Old National for new police headquarters. Strategic goals number 3 and number 5. Number 3 is increase community collaboration and quality of life. Goal number 5, create an efficient government. We got coverage on WSB, Atlanta News First, 11 Alive, Marietta Daily Journal, South Fulton Neighbor, Yahoo, and Google News. The next one, South Fulton Police training officers in spotting the signs of autism. Strategic goals number 3 and number 5. We got coverage on WSB and 11 Alive. The next one, council approves new district lines reflecting growth in census numbers. Strategic goal number 3. And then the last one I wanted to highlight, report named South Fulton, Georgia's fastest growing major city in the last 5 years. And that one is also related to strategic goal number 3. So those are the things that I wanted to highlight that were pushed out with the assistance of our communications department. And that will complete my report for that particular item. Thank you.
Any questions, comments, concerns, queries, allusions, disillusions, hallucinations? All right, I had a teacher at Mays who used to say that all the time. Next item, please.
The next listed item is briefing on city contracts purchases exceeding $25,000. I don't think the...
Other than what was mentioned earlier regarding staff's recommendation concerning the rental and mortgage assistance vendor who was not able to meet the insurance requirement, and we would like to recommend we go with the second highest bidder. That item will be brought to the council agenda for December. So that's all I have under that section. Thank you.
Again, any questions, comments, concerns? Dr. Rao.
City Manager, can you give us a status? I know we were talking about the cameras in the park. What is the status of that project?
I did include it in my report, so let me go to my report, please. It's on page 3 of my report. Pursuant to Resolution 2022-3034, a resolution requesting the city manager to devise and implement an action plan for the installation of cameras on or near city parks and for other purposes. The proposed is a first draft of the requirements of the resolution. Stakeholder departments included police, information technology, finance, parks, and fire. They're continuing to work diligently to fulfill the directives of the resolution. This discovery phase is still pretty lengthy in process, but it is to ensure that we make the best and most responsible direction related to the requirements to fulfill the request. We continue to work with our internal departments and our vendor support to ensure all operational and technology requirements are identified for the solicitation. We have a goal to have the bid packet ready to distribute by the end of November. And the funding source for this important project is the American Rescue Plan. So to make a long story short, we are working with purchasing to hopefully get the procurement out at the end of this month.
You would anticipate maybe, do you have a projected time frame, maybe March?
I would say the bid award should be in front of the council by March. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Not the work will not be completed by then. But we'll continue to keep you updated.
All right. Seeing no one else in the queue, Mr. Clerk, please sound the next item.
Next item is under Roman numeral 4, presentations. Future land use, rural preservation and development credits. Presentation by Mayor Khalid and Farmer D.
All right. So we've heard a lot of concerns. I'm going to just share my screen. Those of you all who are watching on screen can follow along. This is just an introduction, and we're going to have this other presentation on the screen as well. Give me 1 second.
Gotcha.
Okay. So we've heard a lot of concerns about our comprehensive plan, our future land use map, and these other things that we are working on. And I did promise that every month we would introduce some new concept or some new piece of this larger plan. And so today we're going to be talking about conservation credits and some other things. I'm going to just introduce it this way. This is a map of our city. As you can see, there are no districts in it because this is a conversation that we have to have as a whole. We have to put our district concerns aside and really think about what is best for the city at large. The future land use map has, a lot of different pieces to it. There's also on the zoning classification, there are dozens and dozens of zoning classifications. I don't see it advancing here online. Do we know why? Mr. Adams or? Yes, I will. I will send it out.
I'm sorry?
This is not advancing on the Zoom. I'm sharing, but I don't see it. I do see advancing on the Zoom. It's not advancing here.
And you open it up inside the Zoom?
Yes. Yes. Inside the Zoom, it's working, but it's just not working on this monitor this way.
Do you have it on presenter's view?
Mr. Hammond, I see it on your screen. I'm sending it to you right now.
Yeah, because this is showing, I think you have to put on presenter. I'm seeing it. Okay. I'm just not seeing it here. Let's pull the plug here real quick. I know. It just needs to be something. Apparently, this laptop is not giving us everything right now. It's on this one. It's not saying that. It's not saying that. No, this is different.
There it is. Well, no, I don't know. Something different is happening now.
Hold on. What's going on back here?
Pardon us while we work through these technical difficulties. I will take this time to say that in January, we will be back at Southwest Art Center, where we have some augmented Wi-Fi and internet services on the way. You want to try one more time? Okay. Perfect. So I'll just go back. Yeah, this is our city without any of the districts. We have these. We have this future land use map, which describes a variety of possible future land uses. We have this zoning classification map, which breaks down even more land use maps, land uses. But the conversation that I'm encouraging us to have is that they're really all of these different classifications and things really break down into four main categories: industrial use, which is obviously our warehouses, factories, and things like that; urban, which is our highest density areas, which would include our nightlife, any Class A office space, probably where our apartments would be; suburban, which is what most of our city is, right? Neighborhoods and subdivisions; and rural, which are the areas like our farms, our wineries, and just rural areas where we don't want to develop. I think it's pretty clear where our industrial area is. We have a street called Fulton Industrial, right? There are areas that have high density already, and we have areas that are rural. What is important in this conversation is that the more clearly we identify where our industrial areas are, where our urban areas are, and where our rural areas are, it saves everything else in the city from the overdevelopment that we have heard so many concerns from our residents. We may have, and I'm just going to start with this urban area because it's where the highest density would be, and I know that there is a lot of anxiety. Lots of us don't want to see higher density in our backyards, but we do have to put those higher density areas somewhere. All of them don't have to be the same. In this example, you see that there's a dark red circle, which might be the highest density, and pink areas where there are lower densities. As we have this conversation and move through this as a city, there are going to be places, people are going to find that their house may be in an area that we are identifying future land use to be industrial or future land use to be urban, and people may not like that and they may want to move from those areas. I want to encourage people to consider that that is already happening, right? We already have neighborhoods, even without this discussion, we're already finding that places where people have bought and thought that their neighborhood was going to look one way, it is already changing. The advantage of having this courageous conversation about where we're going to put the things that nobody wants in their neighborhood is that when we are clear, people can then make purchases with confidence. And they can also know that if things are coming to their neighborhood that they don't want, if they hold on to their homes, they will be able to sell them at a premium because people will want that land. I always point out this area of Ansley Park, which is adjacent to Midtown. These homes, when I was coming up 20, 30 years ago, were 300,000 or so. All of these homes sell for more than $1 million because they have this as their backyard. Now, everyone may not want that as their backyard, but again, if we make a decision about where these things are going to go, we are giving people notice, and if they feel like they have to move, if we stick to these land uses, they will never have to move again because we've made those decisions. So the two things that we're going to talk about, and this is just, I'm just teeing up this presentation. The two things that we're going to talk about in this presentation are where are the best areas to keep rural. There is actually a science to that, right? And a way to identify areas that have the best soil quality, that have the highest and best uses for those areas may be to remain rural. And as we think about setting up agritourism and agribusiness in our city, we can identify the plots of land that will give us the best return on investment when we do that, and then work to make sure that they are connected in a fashion that people can traverse them and enjoy all of these areas. The second part of this presentation is that we can identify these things and say that these are the things that we want, but in a capitalist society, the majority of rights over land goes to the landowners. So I will continue to push us to become the landowner so that we can control what goes on this land. But there is also a, you got that? Yeah, you know, you're fine. There is also a way to incentivize. If we have areas that are urban and we have areas that are rural, right? There are people that are coming to farms and farmland. They want to build a warehouse and they make an offer. We have to have a way to incentivize not having that private landowner sell to a developer that is building something that we don't want. So is there a way, once we've identified that we're going to have our industrial stuff in one place, our urban stuff in one place, and we're going to keep these certain areas rural, is there a way through the market to incentivize that to happen, to incentivize people that want to build up density to go where we're telling them to go or where we're asking them to go? And for people who have rural land that people want to sell, is there a way for them to be incentivized not to sell to some high density or industrial developer that wants to build something that their neighbors don't want? So how can we use the force of the market to get development in the places that we want it and keep it out of the places that we don't want, and to keep as much of our city as rural and as green as possible? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Farmer D to explain how we will do that.
Just a small feat, right? Good evening, City Council, Mayor. It's great to be here. The D stands for Darren Jaffe. I got the name Farmer D from my mom when I started farming in college. I actually grew up in North Fulton County, and I now live in the Chattahoochee Hills. And I started the farm actually at Serenbe 23 years ago. I didn't stay here all 23 years. I was here for about 4 years. Then been all over the country designing conservation village communities and farms. Serenbe-like in nature, but all over the map from affordable to high-end. Serenbe's more on the high-end side. More recently, I've re-engaged with the city of Chat Hills to help them kind of realize the vision of preserving the rural character and helping them figure out what Mayor explained in the introduction. How do we protect the farms? How do we get farmers on the land? How do we kind of orient development at places where development makes sense? And I'm also currently been working with DeKalb County on mapping the whole 200 square miles and looking at all the undeveloped land and trying to figure out where can we, where does it make sense based on the character of these areas to preserve the land and allow for development and growth, but in a smart way and not in a sprawl way. So that's kind of some context. Congratulations on being the fastest growing city in Georgia. With that, obviously this content becomes extremely relevant. With growth comes sprawl. Unfortunately, most of the growth that we see is what you see on the screen on the left, which is your conventional subdivisions. I fly a lot because I do this work all over the country, and I fly over Atlanta coming home, and you see a lot of that on the left. Unfortunately, we don't see as much of what you see on the right, which is more of a conservation-oriented community. And this is really the principles of what we talk about in conservation communities is how do you protect the land and the most important sensitive land, and at the same time allow for growth. And so there are some great models. There's small examples and there's large examples of what have been traditionally known as hamlets and villages. What the Chattahoochee Hills has defined as hamlets and villages is a little bit different from the traditional definition in scale, but typically the smaller pocket neighborhoods, small hamlets make sense in areas where you don't want a large village mixed use, and then there are some areas that justify more of a larger village. Go back a slide if you don't mind. Oh no, yeah, go ahead, sorry, next slide. So just the basic, down at the bottom here, the two images on the bottom, looking at density versus sprawl. Clearly when you see sprawl, what the American Farmland Trust has done a big study across the country of this, and what they found is sprawl, the cost of sprawl does not pay for itself in the tax revenue. It actually is a losing proposition to cities. The cost of infrastructure, not to mention all the other negative impacts that sprawl has, but just the basic economics of it is not a good business model. It also creates communities where people rely on their cars and takes up all the land for housing, and we aren't left with much open space or farmland. Whereas the density version of what was mentioned in Ansley Park and other, where you have a walkable community, you get more mixed income housing, you can get more of the missing middle in there. It's not just single family residential, and your services are a lot less spread out. So the cost of services is less, and so the economics make more sense. Next slide. So in the Chattahoochee Hill Country, how do you make this work in a capitalist society? How do the economics work? And this can be a whole discussion into itself, but the basic principle is you identify the best land to protect and preserve, and that becomes a sending area, that there are development credits. In the Chat Hills, there's 40,000 acres, there's 40,000 development credits. You can transfer your development rights on your farmland and send it to a receiving area, which is where has been identified a good location to put density on a busy road, access to infrastructure, not on the best land, those kinds of things. And so that's sending and receiving. There's transferable development rights, there's purchasable development rights. The transfer development rights are more negotiated through developers and landowners. Purchase development rights is land banking. The city could go buy land trust could go buy land to protect it. And then there's offset density. If you have a large enough property, you can offset the density right there on the property itself and just move that, conserve and move the density to the area where development makes sense. What we do is we look at a region like DeKalb County, like the Chat Hills, like we would the city of South Fulton, and essentially look at where are the most sensitive ecological habitats. Let me know if I need a If I have a minute, a little extra time's okay. So we look at the most sensitive ecological areas, the watershed, riparian areas, mature forests, steep slopes. Where are the most important areas to protect from a natural habitat and wildlife and natural features? Then we look at farmland. Where's the best farmland? Prime farmland, statewide farmland that should be preserved for farming so we can still grow food. And as we've learned in COVID, that's pretty important to have local food supply. And then based on that, then you back into where does development make sense? Where are the best areas for development? And then how do you maximize the benefits of having development integrated into the natural environment and farms? Next slide. And obviously the benefits, walkable, reducing traffic, more community engagement, access to healthy food, access to open space, more active lifestyles, more connected communities, more affordable housing opportunities. There's several benefits of building more of a village versus a suburban subdivision. And then there are a couple of examples locally. I mentioned Serenbe and Glenwood Park in Atlanta. Final slide. So approaching this from a next steps, developing that base map, taking kind of the simple bubble diagram that the mayor showed in the beginning and really doing that ecological agricultural analysis as the underlay and informing where are these most important areas, and then engaging with community landowners and developers, land trusts, nonprofits, community-based organizations to work together, right, to kind of come up with the best solutions for how to protect the assets. As you grow rapidly, how do you grow in a way that actually development can actually drive conservation, can drive local food, it can drive local jobs, and more livable, resilient communities. Thank you for the opportunity to share that, and would love to work with you guys on it.
All right, thank you. And as folks are getting in the queue, just to break it down a little bit further, if I own a farm, it's 20 acres. Amazon wants to give me, I don't know, $1 million to build a warehouse. But I could sell it to the city or some conservation land trust. They would give me something less than that, but then I would also get these development credits that I could sell to someone on Fulton Industrial if they wanted to do some kind of density. In order for them to get the density that they want, it wouldn't just be a vote of a council or planning commission. They would also have to buy these development credits to build what they want. So we're incentivizing people in both places to build the things where we want them built.
Yes, and there's a number of other tools in the toolkit, right? There's tax credits, we're putting land into conservation, there's philanthropy, there's a number of tools in addition to that we're exploring and using to make this work. There's also government funding from NRCS and other types of funds that are available for land access for farmers, for conservation. So there's a city and a county has a lot of tools to work with, but from a basic economic and kind of the market, yeah, there's, incentivize conservation here by transferring the value to where you want the development to be higher density.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Rowe?
One of the things that we have been talking about, the city is applying for, is a city agriculture plan, and hopefully we're successful. And one of the things I have been talking to Mr. Hull about was how do we identify green space across the city. I think our future land use addresses many of the things the mayor raised because it's already zoned for agricultural. But I'm concerned about areas outside of, like a District 4 where, we can look at urban farming and community gardens and, it's changing so rapidly. How, can you talk just a little bit about your work to kind of, in those areas where you have a lot of density? I'm more concerned about like the, Old National, Cascade area, those areas that are already kind of dense. How do we find that green space and preserve it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's interesting, when we did this work with DeKalb County and we identified some of the more rural and rural suburban areas where this kind of conservation village work could really get, it's too bad it didn't get started 50 years ago, right? Because then we'd have solved for your question. Mm-hmm. But now we started looking at, okay, we can start to solve for that in those areas so that we don't have to worry about that problem later. But what really jumped out Commissioner Ted Terry said, look at all these little pieces where all the people are, right? That we could, the last 4 acres or 2 acres that are here, and those become precious, right? Because those are the last pieces. So it was really interesting to see, and I've been involved in a number of projects where had that land not been protected for ag in the city, we would not have had the opportunity to create an urban farm and provide education for kids and food access and all the amazing, and that is one of the most important pieces, is to have, put it where the people are. But so there's kind of a twofold approach. One is mapping where those properties are, and then building the kind of the social ecosystem to support. Those can be churches, schools, parks, undeveloped, privately owned land that could be protected, and then preserving those, activating them. And my passion is in youth education. I have a nonprofit teaching kids farming and entrepreneurship, and we found that's a really powerful way to activate these spaces and build community and create a revenue source through education around agriculture. But then if you can think about how to kind of find that edge where the development pressure is just pushing that development sprawl out into the rural areas, those are where you can start to protect those pieces and integrate them, right? That's the model. When you develop in a way where you cluster a little bit, preserve a little bit, every time you create those precedents and those policies and zoning incentives, then every project that happens has that green space in it, right?
So you put the incentives, say in an area that's very dense, you put some kind of development incentives on those parcels, or incentives not to develop, I should say, on those parcels that are closest to people, that are like the more infield opportunities?
Absolutely. So you can, one of the things we're looking at doing now in the Chad Hills example is giving some a ranking criteria of value of development, right? So if it's like the last farm standing in an urban area, that should have a higher development credit than just some, scrubby piece of not good land. Same thing in the rural area. If you have a beautiful farm with a great view shed and gives you that rural character, like in District 4, like you'd want to prioritize and maybe give a higher value to that property being conserved. And so that's some of the ways you can do that. Okay.
Yeah. I don't know, maybe this is a question for Mr. Hull. Is this, I know you were beginning to look at this, finding or identifying, I know we had talked about this, about making sure we have areas across the city for urban farming. Had you already started? Is this part of it? I'm just trying to make it all make sense to me.
We actually met the mayor and I think Mr. Jones, I can't remember. But we did meet and we talked. What I was referring to and what you're going to see probably either in the month of December or month of January as we get the activities for the update to the comp plan is that we've had a number of requests, as you know, from religious institutions across the city, mom and pop stores, other commercial establishments, individuals that simply own homes, but they may be growing produce in their backyard. And so I think I had a brief conversation with the Assistant City Attorney McClendon on this, but we don't have a classification in our code for community garden or urban farm. And so we're thinking about bringing forward a recommendation to have that as an accessory use to certain types of primary uses in the city. And so that would be kind of our first start. When we look at some of our churches that have large parking lots or may even have large areas that can grow farms, is there an additional use that they can use? And could this use be an accessory use for a community garden? And so our concern, the only concern would be trying to mitigate potential traffic issues, because if you're successful and you have your stand there and you're growing, you will attract people driving along the major corridors. But what we don't want to do is add to the headache and congestion that we see in some of our major thoroughfares across the city.
Well, I would hope even if we allow them to grow, to prevent the traffic jam, that we truly do get a farmer's market so they can go to market with the product. Because I do see, we have enough traffic problems as it is, so to add to it would just make my hair pull. Yeah, we don't even want to go there. But I do like the idea of the eco mapping because I think it starts moving us in the right direction. And like you said, I know I've been approached by, I think, 4 different organizations just in my area who are very interested in this. And you're right, we don't have a solution for them now, but I only see it growing because more people are inquiring about it, and it's something we should be thinking about. So,
and we've all heard the term, Councilwoman, food deserts.
Right.
And our city is a large city as it relates to the geographic area for cities in Metro Atlanta, and so there are certain areas that we can map out, that we can designate as food desert areas because of the lack of access to fresh produce in particular. And so those could be areas that we can focus in on in terms of making sure that we look at our land use policies and to allow them to be more adaptable to these types of uses. People are not traditionally shopping in grocery stores anymore. A lot of you probably shop from Amazon and have it delivered to your house. So this is yet another way to be able to bring healthy produce to areas that are in dire need because of issues like food deserts.
thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. Councilwoman Willis.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. Mayor Reed of Chattahoochee Hills is real great about sharing information as it relates to development. And I really appreciate his knowledge and expertise. And the fact that they're very particular down in Chattahoochee Hills when it comes to development. And I think almost all of us have been to Serenbe. I know I've been several times, love Serenbe. In your presentation, you mentioned affordable housing. Can you tell me what affordable housing is in the Chattahoochee area and in Serenbe so that I can go look at it?
You and I should have coffee. This is something that we're working on with the city and developing some ways to address that issue, because the success of Serenbe has been, driving, the premiums of the cost of real estate. And this is not just Serenbe. We're seeing this happen all over the country, right? Where this is the problem where farms and farmers and teachers and others get pushed out further and further away as sprawl, single-family residential sprawl creates a higher end the land prices go up. And so what we're doing now is we're trying to figure out models for mapping and incentivizing where you can build more mixed income, affordable farmer housing, artists, educators, et cetera. So the city's been really forward about it. That's one of the big initiatives that we're working on with them now. And I think part of the solution is actually, I think Serenbe was so early in this kind of idea that they needed to the proof of concept was a higher end product, but a village doesn't have to just be a high end mix of houses. I think it's important to, from the beginning, develop and incentivize or require, there's kind of carrots and sticks here, adding affordable housing in, and incentivizing being able to develop, because single family residential is not, it's very challenging to create more mixed income, more affordable product. So, the building type that can be integrated into more of a village context allows you to create more affordable type housing product. And so I think it's just something that I wish I could take you to see examples. There really aren't, and it's really the kind of the Achilles heel of the Chat Hills is that it's, we're preserving 70% of the land for agriculture and open space, but farmers can't afford to live there. They can't afford to buy land there. And so that's one of the reasons why these development rights are so important and the conservation. We're creating and we're working very closely with the Chat Hills Land Conservancy, which does not restrict it to the Chattahoochee Hills. It can spill over into South Fulton. And there's a model, and didn't want to get too in the weeds on it today, but I'm happy to share more what we're working on. But it's called the Agrarian Commons, and it's a national governance and land ownership structure that allows us to create these kind of constellations of farms that are under shared ownership, shared infrastructure, and there's a whole strategy there that allows us to purchase these farms that we've mapped, these help provide access to farmers, especially BIPOC farmers, and there's funding and resources to support this effort so that we can really look at how do we provide access to land, housing, right, infrastructure, shared equipment, marketing and distribution. And that's the goal that we're working on with the city, with a number of nonprofits, local and national. And it's a natural fit, actually, to extend that effort into South Fulton, especially in District 4, where you've got a lot of farms and it's the proximities there. So it's a complicated challenge, and I think, you know, it's going to take leadership at the city and county level, and it's going to take a lot of collaboration to make it work. But I'm confident that we need to move away from just single-family sprawl, suburban sprawl, in order to address the affordable housing piece.
And so if I understand you correctly, you're saying in District 4, it's a natural fit for us to extend farm, you know, sustainable living and consider affordable housing along with that.
Yeah, not exclusively, but that farmland piece for farmer access and to help create a more of a vibrant local food system where you have instead of food coming on trucks to Amazon warehouses and coming to your house, you get to know your farmer and you get to visit your farms. And we actually have food grown here in our county and in our community, and have a pathway for farmers to be able to own land and be able to live here. And I think what happens, unfortunately, is we push farms out and farmers go with it.
I just would encourage you to work closer with the council members who work closely with their residents and know what their residents want and desire in their community. It's good to hear that you are working with Mayor Reed and the council down in Chattahoochee Hills to bring affordable housing. I look forward to reaching out to him and speaking to him about his ideas in that area. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now to District 4's representative, Councilman Sebastian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was actually going to remain quiet, but I've heard District 4 mentioned several times, and yes, it's the part of our city that has sort of the most open land. Also want to caution us when we talk about things like affordable housing in District 4, what that looks like, right? Because sometimes people put a very negative connotation towards it, because guarantee you tomorrow or next door you're going to hear it. Oh, they're going to bring cheap housing to District 4, it's time to move, right? That's just how people tend to react. So I want to really be involved in these conversations, and as a matter of fact, I'm already involved in this conversation because in working with Mr. Hull, one of the things why I really wanted us to take another hard look at the comprehensive plan that was put together before I was here was because of the challenges that we're having in terms of people proposing certain things in District 4, which we do not want, right? And as a matter of fact, I'm already talking to some of the farmers about identifying areas there that are good for growing certain things. That so it seems as if we're sort of in alignment.
Yeah.
It's just that you're looking at the entire city, but there's those things that I'm already projecting that even as we look at our comprehensive plan and go to our public meetings, is to sort of even have a meeting just for the farmers of District 4, to which I understand. I thought there were some, but when I got the real numbers a couple of weeks ago, I was surprised as to how many there are, you know. So I'm looking forward to working with you, and of course, Mayor Reed is someone that I've spoken to several times, not only since I've been a council member, but even before when I was with Fulton County. All right. So again, thank you for your presentation. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
And the mayor to see how we can help not only across the city, but particularly District 4.
Sounds great. And one thing to just comment is there's a whole generation of young farmers that I think, you know, we've got the historic farmers that are on the land now, and then there's this young generation. Where's the next generation of farmers, right? And so we've been working closely with the charter school there, the Chat Hills Charter School. My kids go there. We have a farming program, and there's a lot of work to be done on educating communities about healthy food and healthy food access, as Mr. Hall mentioned, and getting that next generation of farmers an opportunity to, that those farms are there for them, right, when they're ready.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Were you at the USDA presentation there a few weeks
Yes.
ago? Sorry, I missed you. I was there, but I couldn't stay for the whole thing. But I was sharing with some of the folks there that the type of school that I see in Chattahoochee Hills, that's how I grew up in school back in the islands. We always had a little farm that we worked and so on and so forth, so animals around. So we need to have that model more across, across the city and across the state. But surely, it is something that we really need to do to, as you said, bring that next generation of farmers along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Williams.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. So lots of very good information. I know you said that there isn't affordable housing in Chat Hills around Serenbe, but I see on your website that there are several other projects that you have around the country. Do any of these offer an affordable housing where we could perhaps go out on Google Maps and take a look, and just a virtual look, to see what that looks like?
Yeah, there are good models around the country. One of them that comes to mind, so there's this movement that started years ago. They're calling them agri-hoods, right? These kind of neighborhoods built around farms instead of golf courses. I worked for a foundation years ago, and we funded a study around the country on best practices, because a lot of this was suburban, kind of higher end, and I have a background in a lot of work in the youth prison system and social justice work, and so it's been a big passion of mine of how do we make this should not, healthy food should not be only accessible by people with a lot of money, and same thing with these kinds of communities. And one of the projects that we got involved in, this was the Urban Land Institute. We studied agri-hoods across the country. A project actually out of Denver called ARIA, A-R-I-A, that was developed as a affordable housing, mixed income, but a real focus on affordable housing, with a farm in the center. Ran out of juice. Thank you. So that's one. There are several others, and it would be worth maybe putting together a little case study package for us as inspiration, to just look at what are the models. I wish there were more, and there need to be more, and that's part of the drives my work.
So I don't think I see ARIA in your portfolio. Do any of these farms that I'm looking at on your website offer affordable housing? You specifically?
Oh, projects that I've done in the past?
Yes, I'm on your website.
Yeah. There are a few. There's one actually on there in South Carolina that we worked on with the rural town of Branchville. Hasn't been built yet, but we helped with working with the city to plan a mixed income, senior and mixed income kind of farm-based community with the city. So I've worked on a number of initiatives that have prioritized it. Unfortunately, a lot of the projects that are funded and we get hired to help consult on are more higher end projects, which is a lot of the reason why a lot of my passion has been working more at this level with cities and counties to try to address kind of some of the more access and equity opportunities within this work. I'd have to look back on there to give you some more specific examples. A number of the projects have some affordable housing. A lot of the California projects, there's some requirement of it, but there was a project we worked actually with the city of National City in San Diego, and worked with, I don't think I only have a handful of projects highlighted on the website, but it's a project called, it's actually an affordable senior housing project with a large urban farm, community garden. We worked with the city on that project. Plenty to share from kind of the experiences there. So, yeah, and I'd be happy to follow up and share a few other examples that come to mind.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I would be interested in seeing what this looks like fully built out. Even if, like I said, it's just, getting the information from you and doing a quick look on Google Maps.
Sure.
to just get a visual of what you're proposing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilwoman Williams. Mayor Pro Tem Reeves.
Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing me. And thank you for bringing to this presentation, because when we talk about agri-hoods and then affordable housing, I like to use the word sustainable housing, particularly for seniors and veterans that allow for like cottage homes type style buildings with a minimum square feet heated floor space of 250 square feet. And so that's mixed in there because of the new type of housing that people would, want to do, and what the market dictates that is coming. And so as we look to redevelop areas within our city, I think that is something that is going to be useful and something that is going to be in demand. And I do look forward to continuing on having a conversation with you offline about this and the areas where we could, they could go. Particularly, and a buy-in from the communities around that area on where they actually can go, and then update our map accordingly so we can welcome the developers who want to bring that to our communities. So thank you much for your presentation, and I look forward to talking further with you about this issue.
Thank you. You as well.
All right, thank you, Farmer D. Before we let you go, I want to just circle back to this thing of development credits. We've talked a lot particularly about farming, and I think agribusiness is a form of economic development that we have not explored enough. And Chattahoochee Hills is doing great work. So is Creekside High School. They have a great program for young farmers. But for me, when you first came and you made this presentation, this, for me, was less about farming and more about density. Mm-hmm. And many people moved here to South Fulton, obviously because the land was affordable, but many other people, my family included, could afford to live anywhere in the city, could afford homes in Alpharetta or Smyrna, but we hate that traffic, mm-hmm. right? And if we continue to just clear cut land and build subdivisions everywhere that we see a field, our area will end up just as congested as Gwinnett or any of these other places that I hate to drive to. And so how do we restructure, I guess, the way that we are doing our zoning and permitting so that number one, we aren't just, clear cutting 100 acres to put 300 homes on, because every time we do that, whatever the older subdivision is next door, they start having runoff issues. All of a sudden, the creek that's behind their house is creeping up into their backyard because there's nowhere for this water to go. We get more and more traffic on our roads, and we have to think about widening our roads. And people are like, I moved out here to not live around 10,000 other people. And so beyond just saving land for farmland, in places where, there's a beautiful subdivision and across the street there's a field, how do we save that land to just be a field instead of another subdivision that just adds more? And not that we don't want to have new home development, but how do we maybe cluster homes instead of just clear cutting this land and just putting subdivisions everywhere?
Well, I mean, honestly, it's a stacked approach, right? And I think the top of it is the planning and zoning, the overlay districts, the way that the zoning, determines kind of the character area of these different of the different parts of the city. And so that's one of the key drivers that we look at is what is the character area there now? Is it rural? Is it suburban? Is it urban? And the conservation metrics that get applied are appropriate for the character area that it's in. And obviously you want to keep growth, or where, keep kind of the limits of growth and keep urban. And if it's already suburban, we have a 50% kind of metric to keep that green field, to keep some of the forest and farm, and have that the suburban areas not be be a little better, right? Be more conservation subdivision oriented. And that's kind of the model in the subdivision, in the suburban areas. As soon as you start to get into the rural areas, we apply a rural character metric, which is more like the Chat Hills, more like a 70% to 90% conservation. So you really preserve it from becoming suburban. And so that's one piece, is like understanding the character area that you're in and trying to preserve that character area by applying certain principles of conservation and putting in the zoning that supports that, that incentivizes that, or requires that. And then there's an education aspect of this. And I think a lot of this is about, educating the community, the landowners, to see the value of, here's what it could be, and here's what, if we do this, this is what it's likely to be if we don't do anything and continue to let things happen as they are. And here's what it could look like if we actually implement these better plans and policies. And so that's kind of at the macro. And then I'd say on the project by project basis, what we're finding now is, we're doing this work with DeKalb County as example. And then at the same time, there's projects beating the door down. And the commissioners are saying, hey, can you go talk to this developer before they just grade this site and give them some ideas for how they could actually, apply the conservation model. And so, that's what we're doing on a project by project basis. And then you get the landowners around that property to understand the benefit of, a little bit more density over here gives you permanent green space forever over there, it's proven itself over and over again, like Central Park being the great example. The highest value real estate in the country is around Central Park for a reason. And so, creating value by preserving green space and giving access is, part of the upside to those landowners in those communities is their real estate value goes up, as opposed to just having another subdivision next door. So I think, looking at it holistically, you start with the mapping, identify character areas, incorporate kind of, educate and work on the zoning and the development patterns that make sense based on where you are, and drive conservation or development or the, appropriate patterns based on where they are, and then create kind of this toolkit of incentives that you can put in place so that you can educate your landowners before they sell to the Amazon warehouse. We've actually, it's interesting, most of our work historically has been hired by developers, right? So like the Serambis of the world will hire us to help them master plan their farm and their community. And over time, we found more and more landowners were finding us. It's harder to find them, but they're finding us saying, hey, before I just sell out to a developer, can you help me think about what I should be doing with this land? And we have a couple of examples of warehouse, and unless you give them some constraints and say, I want to protect 70% of the land, and this is the 70% that should be protected, and that's the area that I'll sell you for, a mixed-use development or a warehouse. Now the landowner can actually help drive the process instead of just kind of, the developer taking over. So there's educating landowners and educating developers, and ultimately it starts, I think, here, of setting the goals and having the policies to back those up to incentivize and kind of direct development in the way you want to see it happen here.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. I will make sure that all of my colleagues have your information, and I'm sure that we'll be reaching out to you.
Thank you. Good evening.
To keep South Fulton green. We're at the end of this agenda.
We have one item.
All right, go ahead.
Last item on the agenda is recommendations for City of South Fulton fee schedule revised November 2022. It's be presented by the Finance Director, Karen Slayton Dixon, and Derek Hall, Community Development Director.
Mayor, Council, we want to bring this before you, the fee schedule revised. I mentioned this during our budget presentation for the FY23 budget, that we were going to be bringing back a proposal to the council to revise some of the fees. So I appreciate all the departments that actually submitted information. Appreciate Derek Hull for pretty much spearheading this and taking on. So I'm going to let him initially start the presentation, and then we'll kind of tag team on parts of it.
Thank you to our finance director. Good evening again, Mayor and Council. We would be remiss as we give this presentation if we didn't acknowledge our city manager and our assistant city manager. Interestingly enough, I tried to put their names on the presentation, but they teased me and they said that staff is going to handle it. But it is because of the efforts of Tammy and Don that all the directors got together with their staff to make sure that we undertook this task, because we understood this to be critical times in the city. We don't know what lies ahead of the city as it relates to talks from Washington related to an inflation or not. However, we wanted to make sure that we brought this forward for council's consideration as it relates to our current fees. By way of background information, as Ms. Dixon mentioned, during the budget presentation in 2023, the city staff mentioned looking at the current costs related to fees. As we know, there are rising costs all over, and as a result of that, making sure that we're capturing enough money to at least be somewhat cost recovery. Georgia isn't, from my experience in working here, this state isn't a cost recovery state, but at some point you have to look at all of the activities that go into the day-to-day municipal services to make sure that you're at least trying to get payment for some of the services being rendered, The last fee increase based upon our research occurred, it says actually 2022, but that's supposed to be 2020. And the council at that time adopted the current fee schedule. The idea is that with some of the proposed fees, it will help to enhance municipal service through staff training, but also through technology. I think as a community, globally, on a national level, however you want to look at it, we understand how technology has advanced much of the activities just throughout any community during this COVID period. And so looking at how we can enhance our community to make sure that we're providing the public, and that is, of course, the residents and the business owners, the greatest type of service that is needed and required. The specific activities that each department director and his or her staff engaged in was convening a meeting to kind of talk about the current fee structure, looking at municipalities across Metro Atlanta and comparing our fees to that of other municipalities, looked at the specific task, and tonight you'll hear from one department just the activities that are required to undertake an approval or consideration of a particular application. Identify new fees. You know, we are a new city. We don't have all the fees. We didn't have all the fees when we did our last adoption of the fee schedule. And so as we look to making sure that we can capture all fees for all services that we provide, you will see recommendations of new fees. And then finally, looking at best practices. What's occurring across the region as it relates to providing the needed services. Karen is going to present this part of the presentation.
Okay, and here on this slide, we just kind of wanted to show you some of the revenues as we were going through the fee schedule. And what you're seeing now is actually a chart just to show you the breakdown of what our FY22 fees and revenue were. And as of FY22, you can see, just for one instance, our business and occupational tax make up at least 2% of the general fund revenue, and this is where you're going to find where your alcohol license and your regular business license will fall in that category. We also talk, court is doing a little bit, and you can see where kind of fines and forfeitures don't even make up not even 1% of the general fund revenue. So really not bringing in a whole lot of money as far as the overall general fund revenue. And then we go to the next slide. And on this slide, this is looking at our FY23 projected fees of what we're working on now. And so just once again, looking at our business license, here is actually making up 1% of the total general fund revenue. Fines and forfeiture still less than 1%. Where our biggest percentage is going to be, of course, in our property tax, which is 24%. So.
Thank you, Karen. As we are undertaking this task, we wanted to just showcase for Mayor and Council and the public understanding as departments process applications, permits, licenses, whatever the case may be, just so that you can get a general idea and perspective of some of the tasks associated. So I'm going to ask our colleague, Lieutenant Esprit from the police department, to come up, and she is going to walk you through all of the activities for the license and permit for alcohol and just the process and the workflow.
Good evening, City Mayor, City Council, and City Manager. In addition to our internal workflow process, HB 879 legislation governs the centralized permitting, which provides the department to be uniform with the state. In this process, it requires that the applicants upload their application and any additional documents into the state portal for acceptance by the state for their approval. Upon completion of this process, using the state portal, the initial application is sent simultaneously to the state as well as the local. So with that process, it aligns for the state and the local to be on the same page with the applicant. Going into our workflow, I'm gonna call Mrs. Jacqueline Bell to explain our internal process in addition to the centralized permitting process.
Hello everyone, my name is Jacqueline Bell. I am with the Alcohol and License Division. Once we receive the applications through the state portal, the next process is to review the applications, contact all the applicants. From there we would set up a meeting to review the applications and get all the original documents and the applications. If they meet all the requirements, from that point we would do the background checks, fingerprints, collect all fees. From that point we would do all the inspections. If all the inspections pass, we would then set up the applications to be reviewed by the City Council.
We wanted you to hear just kind of general parameters. I know as elected officials, sometimes as the public, you never know the behind mechanics of what it takes to take these processes through. Both ladies were generous as it relates to kind of explaining this particular one. My department in particular is a part of this particular process. And so before it actually even comes to you and before it goes to the city manager, each department head and his or her representative will have to review a single license. So just think for just a moment, a person that's applying for alcohol, off-site premise sales for beer and wine has to be reviewed by the majority of departments here in the city. And so the question becomes, when we look at all of the activities, are we actually charging enough to cover the costs of each professional in the city of South Fulton that's touching these types of projects? So as we conclude this presentation, we want to leave you with what our next steps are as it relates to this particular activity. As a part of the staff report, you also received, and each director was tasked by the city manager's office to identify if the fees for a particular license, permit, or application needs to be changed. If not, leave it as it is. And if there is a proposal, indicate what that proposal is going to be in the column that's identified for fiscal year 23, and then an explanation. And so our intent is, at the conclusion of this presentation, so that the public who's going to be most affected by the proposed changes, we will upload the proposed fee schedule to the website. We will create a designated email address. If anyone has any questions related to the proposed fees, they can send their responses to that website. We will capture it. And before we come back to this council, we'll have a summary of all of the comments and any recommended changes that we're going to bring forward to the City Council for consideration. And our hope is that we can have this recommendation before Mayor and Council at the January 21st meeting in January 2023. And again, the intent is, as we're trying to assess the services, as we're trying to make sure that we're providing top-notch services for our residents and our business owners, that we provide some additional technical advances, and we provide some additional training to staff so that we can provide the services that we're needing to do so. So with that, I will conclude my presentation.
Mayor, may I make a brief comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Derek Hole, and I want to thank Ms. Karen Slayton-Dixon for their presentation. As they mentioned, I had told them during the budget process that it was important for us to get this task done, and so, they took the direction and ran with it. So I do appreciate the work that they did and the work that the departments did as well. But as he mentioned, the council has not approved a fee schedule since May of 2020. So we just felt like with some of the changes and as he mentioned, the administrative work that goes in, this would be a good time to have you guys review those along with staff, and hopefully you will take our recommendation into consideration. We know that this is a monumental task, and it was something that we wanted to
we use as a part of our analysis. We obviously looked at the city of Atlanta, and even to a degree, we looked at some of the counties, just as comparison purposes. We looked at cities in North Fulton County, and obviously those that are closest to us. So depending upon the application, the license or permit, in some instances our fees were lower, in some instances our fees were higher. But I also know, talking to other community development directors across the region, as you mentioned, many of the municipalities in the area are considering fee increases.
Well, thank you very much, because that's one of the complaints that I've heard from a lot of developers, that, of course, our pricing was not in line with a lot of other cities. So thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to digesting all of those numbers. Can you make it bigger next time? Because my eyes are.
Yes.
I don't know if it's just me, but it's hard to read. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm in the queue.
All right, I'm coming right to you. I just want to follow up. Thank you for that salient observation, Councilwoman Gomes. Mr. Hull.
Live with the city manager and you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Willis. Seeing none others in the queue, you good, Mr. Sebastian? All right, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I believe that completes our agenda for this evening.
All right, we have this zoning and alcohol hearing. I feel the spirit asking for a break. Is everybody good? Can we do this hearing first?